Now we're to the energy work, which this whole thing is based on. So, Edgar Cayce, again, the sleeping prophet, says everyone is psychic. And it's simply an exercise of the pineal gland and learning to work with our extrasensory perceptions, which oftentimes when someone's going through an awakening, they seem crazy because they're perceiving things that are not there. Drunvalo was a part of an experiment where they brought in over 100 different types of healers, from shamans, chi masters, Reiki masters, witches, everybody. And they measured the vibrations coming off of these energy workers. They all had the same frequency of the vibration of the heart. So our heart vibration is like the middle or the median vibration. And working through our heart is the easiest way to do energy work, from my opinion. So this is why I do not advertise that I do Reiki. I put it on my cards so people have some idea what I'm talking about, but it is only energy. And I actually don't do anything. I only channel energy. And I'll explain that as well. So the second part I learned from Dolores Cannon. It changed my entire life. That life is about learning, but you must learn your lesson to pass the current grade that you're in. And if you tap out of this life, the next one, you got to get back to that same lesson. And it was actually 2 years ago this month when I learned it. And I was having panic attacks still, and just like days of panic attacks, and it was going on for a couple of years. And when I learned that, I thought, I do not care what is ahead of me. I am not going through that again. I'm not getting back to this point to make this decision. Like, this is my chance. And I worked with suicide all the time, so it was a very common thing to talk about, you know. So this also pertains to the way Drunvalo Melchizedek describes energy work. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, my knee hurts, can you work on it? Of course. And if I work on their knee, and I only channel energy for their highest good. So I'm not giving my energy, I'm channeling energy to their highest good. If they have not learned the lesson from their pain, then the pain cannot be resolved. And if I try and resolve it, that's going to create karma between us that I do not want. So I don't actually do anything in an energy session. There are certain manipulations of energy I do, as far as grounding, aligning, and opening energy centers and clearing the energetic field and calling back energy. But true deep healing is on the responsibility of the person, which can make it, if somebody comes up to me, can you heal this? And I'm like, you're responsible for it, let's try it. It's going to be it's a turn off, and it doesn't usually come across the way I mean to. So we have to take responsibility for everything we experience and give gratitude for it. And then regret is just an unlearned lesson. So if I have a regret, to me, that's my mind telling me I still have something to learn from this. And regret energy is a low frequency. And we don't have to have any regrets. We can look at, well, I learned this, so I'm glad it happened. I'm glad I did that. It might not have been right at the time for, whatever reason, but you can be grateful for it. You do not have to hang on to regret because any social obligation, anything else. You can heal those aspects within yourself. And the conscious mind is limited. So if I'm going through something and I think, this is absolutely terrible. Like, why is this happening to me? And then I think, oh, my higher self is doing this. Why would I do this to myself? Oh, I know my conscious mind is limited, and this is a part of my lessons. And oftentimes we hear that a person will not change unless they are uncomfortable. So if you were completely happy, why would you change anything? So we have to experience these things to grow, to be the person we are. And if someone hurts us, I look at that as my soul was floating around and say I need to learn forgiveness. And another soul's floating around, and I'm like, hey, can you hurt me so I can learn to forgive? And they're like, sure. And they're willing to take on that karma for me. So not only am I grateful for my own personal growth, but I'm grateful for their sacrifice. And it takes a lot of conscious acknowledgement to really embody this, but everything is a practice. Life is a practice. It is only a school. So I kind of talked about channeling energy versus using your own energy. When you channel energy, you should not be drained from doing energy work. So I imagine the chakra one hand length above my head as a light, a gateway to my higher self, and the pranic tube between them to my crown channels energy down through me to my heart, out my arms. And that's usually how I'm doing energy work. There's different ways, but that's the simple way. Now, if I am closer to the person, like a relative, or I really want to heal the person, unconsciously I will take on this responsibility that I need to heal them. And then I take on the frequency of their blocks, and then I'll feel that pain. So if I'm working on their shoulder and I'm like, I want to heal them so bad, I start feeling pain in my shoulder. And many energy workers that you talk to experience this at the beginning of their practice, of taking on pain of clients. But to me, there are two ways to look at it. It can either be that you are taking on the pain, or you have something called a matching picture. So if there's a similar block between us that has a similar frequency, and the energy that I am channeling through me, which is completely conscious energy. Energy is just as conscious as you are, and anything else is. So if that energy works on me and I feel pain in the same way that they're feeling, it may be me taking on their pain, or it may be me being healed in another way. So there are different ways to look at it, and it's a practice, again, trying to identify these things and identifying when someone's in your energetic field, when an emotion you're feeling is from you, or if it's somebody else's.
What form of Reiki do you practice?
I don't.
You don't?
Well, I mean, I do practice energy work, but as far as Reiki, it's, to me, an avenue for practice. So I studied Reiki level 1 on YouTube at the beginning of this, and a bunch of other energy avenues. So the reason I quit my job, because I was a government contractor after I got out working on the same psych unit. I quit my job because of 3 people I worked with. They asked me, the first guy was a psych nurse that we had literally been in fights with patients before. He'd been in psych nursing for 20-some years and big into politics, doesn't believe in Eastern medicine, but he trusted me. And trust seems to play a big part in this, and it can. So he had an ACL replacement 20 years, so it's like 21 years ago now. So 20 years when I was working with him. And he was 50, he got told his cholesterol was high, started working out, hurt his knee, and then we worked opposite schedules. So by the time I saw him, it was day 10 of this injury, and he had hurt his shoulder as well, and it was day 4 of his right shoulder injury. I had heard that people who do metaphysical events will time like $1 a minute or something like that. And we were on the psych unit, and he was limping. He was like, dude, can you please help me? And he doesn't even believe in it. So I had just gotten back from Colorado, the class here, and we go into an office on the unit, and I start on his shoulder, and I'm like, I'm going to do 10 minutes and just channel energy and see what happens, because that's all I'm doing is channeling energy after I connect to their higher self. 2 times during it, he was sitting like this, and he's like, I don't know what you just did, but I just felt electricity shoot down my arm, out my hand, and down my leg, out my foot. And then after 10 minutes, I take my hands off. I'm like, how's it feel? And I'm sitting behind him, and he goes, it doesn't hurt. I was like, are you serious? And he was like, would I be shitting you? Like, he was freaked out. So then I go on his knee, and because it was an older injury, I spent 20 minutes. And he said during that time, like, I was doing hand placements, and he said my hands would get super hot as soon as I would put them on, and he would feel them heat up, and then I'd move to another spot. By the time my hands got to the next spot, they'd be cooled off, they'd heat up again, but the spot they left would stay hot. And he also felt electricity shooting out his knee. After 20 minutes, his pain totally went away, and he had surgery scheduled for the next week, and he didn't get surgery. So we walked back on the psych unit, and people are like, why are you guys acting so weird? And I refused to say I healed him, so I wouldn't say a word. And he didn't know what to say to anybody because he didn't believe this worked. So then these blocks that I talk about can go through the energetic bodies as well. So another woman I worked with, who's one of the only people who really believed in me as I started seeming to go absolutely crazy, through this. She had dropped like a book between the tendons on her foot, and then on her other foot, she dropped a box on the tendons, which was interesting because I learned Edgar Cayce, nothing happens, accident or injury in our physical body unless it's connected to our other bodies, like it's a sign for us. So I still love her very much, and I worked on each foot on the unit for 15 minutes, and then she didn't say anything, and I don't ask, because if the need to ask for validation comes from the ego, and that you have to let that go. So I didn't say anything. A couple weeks later, I'm at work, she calls me in the office, she's like, hey, and she's been in nursing like so long that she didn't have a nursing degree. She started before they needed degrees. Yeah, and total badass woman. I love her so much. So she had been through so much trauma and the depression and a bunch of other stuff, and abusive husbands, losing her children. So she said she never really worked through those things. She compartmentalized them. And she started having dreams of like us in a car, and the moonroof would open and a white light would go out and a blue light would come in. And then she had this dream of an all-white house. And all the windows were painted white and it was pristine, except in the house there was one room that was dark and dirty and cobwebs and full of boxes. And in her dream, she began going through those boxes and like opening them and going through, and the box would just disappear. And she was progressing through all these traumas that she refused to address. And that was the energy working through the emotional body on the physical injury.
Emptying the file drawer.
Yeah. And Edgar Cayce also talks about he has presentations on his work. And one of the presentation talks about in your dreams, if you see a house, that house may represent your body. And the presenter says, if I see a leak in my dream in the house, I know something's wrong in my body. And I also think practicing, working with your dreams and creating the subconscious to make, because your subconscious can actually become completely conscious. And we can be what is called supra-conscious. Anyways, that's dreams. But the third one was a military nurse, and she had a headache. And she kind of believed in spirituality. I think she practiced some stuff, go to metaphysical stores. But she was a army nurse and my boss. And she comes into work and said she had a headache for I don't know how long. And I was like, well, I've never worked on a headache, but I'll try it. So again, we're on the psych unit, which is like the least conducive healing environment on that level. But so I started on her head, and in like 10 minutes, she said her headache went away. So I was like, cool. So I put my hands on her shoulders and I started grounding her. She ended up getting out, running to the bathroom after a few minutes. And she came back and she was like, when you put your hands on me, I felt myself like a layer of electricity filling me down. And I was cleansing her chakra system. And then she said nausea came up. She ran in the bathroom and she hadn't eaten. She puked up some black tar. And then she started sleeping again. So whatever the block was is physical energy, and it needed to come out in that manner. And then that was like a Thursday, and I saw her again that Monday. She ended up puking again some more and sleeping even better. And that's when I decided, like, yeah, I'm definitely quitting this, teaching people how to, I want to teach people how to heal themselves. Because no one can actually do it for us. We can get assistance, but, so that's the energy work I do.